which is fine. Um, let's try to keep those clean and crisp. I mean, I like diving into it, but
No. We'll try to keep it as short as we can.
all right, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Alabama Football Podcast, powered by Bama Hammer. Tom, Alabama completely dismantled Tennessee to the tune of 49-10. But was it fair that they really had 8 of 18 returning starters out of the game due to injury?
Of course it was, man. This is one of our biggest two rivalries ever. And I love seeing the fact that this was the second worst beating they've ever taken from us in the history of this series. Oh yeah, dude. You know what? It's man football, and injuries are part of the game, and it's next man up, right? I guess their next men up are just not quite as good as our next men up would be.
Yeah, I agree. Right, this is SEC football. This is kind of big boy football, and over the years, we've gotten no.
Yeah, I want to start that over. I didn't like some of how that sounded that I just said. Let's start that one more time, please.
Wow, we've not done that in a while.
I know. Just do this one more time, man. I just want to make sure Brian's paying attention. Hey, Brian, how's it going, dude?
Yeah, yeah. Here, and if he doesn't take it out, hey fans, this is how we make sausage.
Fans, meet Brian. Brian, meet fans.
All right. Let's do all that again. Damn, what did I say?
Take 420.
All right. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Alabama Football Podcast, powered by Bama Hammer. Tom, Alabama completely dismantled Tennessee on Saturday, 49-10. Is it fair that 8 of 18 of their returning starters missed the game?
Absolutely, man. It's Tennessee Volunteers, man. I hate that damn Rocky Top song.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. This is big boy football in the SEC, and as cliched as it sounds, sometimes your best ability is your availability. And if they have that many guys, dinged up, I mean, never root for injury or anything like that. But part of competing and sustaining, the competitive advantage is being able to field a roster and having the depth, right, to prevent to rotate and prevent injury through the course of the season, and obviously to stave off, collapse when you do have injury strikes. So yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, it wasn't sort of their best against our best, but we brought who we brought, and they brought who they brought, and ours were better than theirs.
No, absolutely. And I was kidding about the Rocky Top song, kind of, just a tiny bit, because I really can't stand the song. But in all seriousness, as you mentioned this, man, if we had that many guys down, would it change the complexity of this game as you and I talked about this weekend? Of course it would. If we had 8 guys out of our starting lineup, would it affect the team that we would field? Yes. I will say, would it affect our team as much as other teams? No. And so I think it doesn't hurt for a minute to talk about that. How many times are we watching football games and we don't see Alabama guys laying on the ground? And we've talked about this over the past few years. It's almost like they're robots. I mean that in a complimentary way to the program. Is, you and I remember 10 years ago during that lean decade, guys would drop like flies in a football game. And we'd have games where 3 or 4 guys would go down, in a game. And it was very normal to have, to lose a few starters during the season. But last year's team was very blessed to be relatively healthy when they won the title. And in the past few years during this run, they've been very, very fortunate. And it just speaks to how much of a fine-tuned machine this program is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it speaks to the recruiting machine, right? And bringing in the players so that you can rotate, so that you can sustain. And like you said, we've definitely had some lean years, fighting through injuries and fighting through attrition. So I think it's part of the process. It's part of the overall is to be able to have the depth and the readiness of the players to compete. You and I said, and kind of saying it as a joke, but there's a reality to it that, losing 18 players, would that have impacted us? Yes, absolutely. We kidded, if you let me pick the 8 guys, it still would have, out of the 2 deep, it still would have impacted us. And so the fact that, I'll give them a little tip of the cap to that, but part of that is program building, not just fielding a team on Saturday, but it's program building, and that's something that Saban has definitely proven to be a master at, right?
No, true. And I'm also speaking not only just the recruiting, but I guess what I meant by that is when I call these guys machines in a complimentary way, is it goes to everything Saban has done. It goes to their diets. It goes to how he works them in the off season. It goes to how they're tracking how many plays they do in every single practice, and they're adding up their reps, and they're monitoring their reps, and they're gauging. They do all this extensive testing in the off season on every aspect of their body. So it's like a computer program. So whenever they do have something go off in a practice, it's almost like a fire alarm, right, in somebody's house. Like they've done all this testing on all these players' body regimens during the off season, that if something's off a little bit, kind of like our oil light coming on our car, they can get ahead of it well before an injury can occur, I guess is what I was getting at. Is like right. They do all this preventative maintenance on their athletes all season, all 12 months out of the year, that I think that speaks a lot to how these guys stay so healthy.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't remove the risk completely. You never remove it completely, but you can manage it down, and that's something that Saban with his approach has worked very hard to do. Why don't we take a look at offense? Alabama racked up 49 points against the Volunteers. What jumped out to you?
I think one of the first things that we that really caught my eye was just the multifaceted plays within the plays. And we've seen this a lot here with Lane Kiffin, but it just seems I like how he is layering in more complexity to the offensive play calling as the season progresses. And so there's numerous plays where you have 3 different plays within the play that the defense has to account for, and it really stretches the defense. And so there was on Jalen Hurts' big scramble early in the game that kind of got the offense going. You and I saw where they had run several plays offsetting each other, literally flip-flopping a play from the right to the left. And the action was, we're gonna fake a screen out here wide with our 2 wide set on the right. We are going to, we're going to fake to our running back here as a counter trap, and then we're going to motion the quarterback. And they did the same exact motion all 3 or 4 times in a row, just running different directions. And with those young linebackers due to injury, I think it really messed them up.
Yeah, it really did. And we would have the tight end, to the and like you said, we'd flip it, but the tight end to the left side of the formation. The left side of the formation, we'd have a screen set up, and then we'd kind of fake the handoff. And so everyone's reading their keys, right? And so you've got the defense watching for the screen. You've got sort of the interior defense watching for the run. Their linebackers followed. This is what I didn't understand. Their linebackers followed the strong formation. And so, with Howard lined up, offset sort of to the left, their linebackers went both sort of north of the center. And then Howard would go in motion, and they wouldn't follow him. They would, it's like they were stuck there. And all of sort of the momentum of the defense was to the left, and Jalen would keep the ball and run to the right, and did that time and time again. There, I think we switched it up and ran it to the other way. But consistently, we would do that. And like you said, that's a play within a play. That's 3 looks that the defense is sort of keying off of. Take our Darius's long run. That was a reverse on a jet sweep. How many times have we run the jet sweep? And how many times have we run the reverse of it, off of it? Well, once, right? And it goes for a 29-yard touchdown. And so those are the types of things we build up tendencies. And all the times you were saying, oh, I don't like this play, we were building up to run a reverse off of it. And so I like that. I like that sort of that mind game in the play calling. And we saw a lot of that on Saturday. And we also saw a lot of just lining up and sort of out athleting them.
Oh, sure. But now when you talk about setting up plays, I haven't seen Lane Kiffin do it to the extent that he did in this game. So when I said building up to it, I really think the layering in of running the same play several times in several different ways because you have so many different looks within the play. I haven't noticed him doing that as much this season as he did in this game. And as you mentioned, there was a very conscious, deliberate effort to expose their formation. And so as they were, as Gary Danielson was saying on the telecast, they were running a base nickel in this ball game due to injuries at linebacker. And as the listeners know, that's kind of our base is a nickel. And so when you only have two linebackers in the game and they're both inexperienced linebackers and one of them's having to call the formations for the front seven, it definitely puts a strain on their defense. And it seems like we saw it in tape and we exploited it early, and Tennessee didn't adjust. Right. They didn't try to come in a dime. They didn't try to bring another backup linebacker in and try to run a 4-3-4. They didn't try to do a 6-man line front. I mean, the biggest thing that shocked me in this is they did not make any adjustments to that at all. We just finally stopped doing it because we didn't need the points anymore, but they didn't make any adjustments throughout the whole game on that.
No, and that's something that was almost flummoxing, right? It's if you're going to keep giving us this, then like what's the trick, right? Are you that bad at sort of recognition, or that sort of depleted at players? And maybe it's a little bit of both, but but we said, this is money on the table. If they're going to keep giving us this, then we're going to keep taking advantage of that. And you talk about not seeing so much of sort of that type of scheming, from Kiffin this season. I sort of searched my brain. Is there a reason Kiffin would want to demonstrate that type of something against guys like Tennessee?
Oh, absolutely. But also obviously because of his ties, right?
Right. Of course. Right.
But I also think that there's an increasing comfort level with his quarterback.
Oh yeah.
And also it also helps that you have a senior leader in Ardarius Stewart back in the game as well.
Right.
And so I think all of those factors played in, but I am really surprised that Tennessee just did nothing to really, they did nothing to try to confuse a freshman quarterback, and I was kind of amazed at that. What else jumped out at you from the offensive side of the ball?
I think there were, maybe a couple of things that jumped out. I'm going to go, Bo Scarborough. I was surprised that he started the game. I really was. He was the first running back in. Later in the game, when he broke that 85-yarder for a touchdown down the sideline, there were a couple of things that just, came to mind is that was sort of executing, his size and speed running down the sideline. He literally was outrunning cornerbacks, and it was like watching a freak show happen before your eyes because he's so big. He should not be bigger than, cornerbacks should be some of the fastest guys on the roster. They're not always as big, but they should be some of the fastest guys. And he was just outstriding them, just outrunning them. And that was pretty something. And then I just enjoyed almost the called shot that Saban had earlier in the week. He talked about, Bo's going to make an impact before the season is out. And, who knew just a couple of days later that he was going to just really show out in the way that he did. I thought that was pretty impressive. That jumped out to me.
Well, it's interesting that Bo did start the game, and we talked about the fact that was that effort they were going to make to be physical and to run at this team. And And so while I agree with, what you said about, the big run that he had, if you go back and was to look at the stats, you'd be shocked that he only had 5 carries and Damian Harris had 14 carries.
Right.
And so that surprised me that that while he had his best game as an Alabama running back, he only had 5 carries on the game.
Yeah, he did. And Jacob, who it's almost like pick a hat over these guys, almost any of them could be, a number one starter for, for someone else. And, Jacobs looked very, very good, but he only got a limited number of carries too. And so he wasn't, featured so much. I wonder, and we talked about sort of the look that Tennessee was giving us and us, exploiting that to the extent that they continued to line it up. I wonder if, and a couple of weeks ago we talked about, we didn't like the way, especially you were vocal in not liking the way we were using Hurts and maybe giving him too much of a workload. I don't think that we gave him too much of a workload Saturday, but maybe we gave him more carries than he would have gotten as a function of Tennessee saying, run that play again. Almost Tennessee was asking us to run it again. And he got almost more and more comfortable running it, to the point that he broke a long run, and he was outrunning corners and safeties that had an angle on him, and he just seemed to be gliding, but he was outrunning. We even paused and rewound it and almost had like a little comedy show with one guy looked like he was just hoofing, and Jalen was just kind of la-ti-da running, but he was outrunning the guy and scored a long touchdown. So, talk to me about how we use Jalen. Do you think we use him too much, just right? Do you think, would he maybe have gotten less carries? What do you think about that?
Well, I think for me, 12 carries is too much.
Okay.
I would prefer the 6 to 8 carries in a typical game. But I think that was more a factor of the defensive ends were keying on the running backs so much, and we're crashing down and we're not keeping containment that, it'd be nice to know how many of those 12 carries he just said, well, I've got to take this because there's 15 yards around the corner here that I can get. And so it's very safe to assume that there are 3 or 4 of those carries that were designed to go to the running back, but he felt comfortable taking it upon himself because the defensive ends were crashing into the backfield.
Yeah, and that's fair too. He's got the read there, and so he's got to read it right. And so we're going to call this play that potentially has multiple options. Well, he's going to keep it if it's there. And Tennessee kept leaving it there. So, you might look at the raw number, 12 with the running quarterback. I don't know. That's kind of maybe right at where I'm comfortable. If that's more than you're comfortable with, I'm fine with that. But, a little bit of that is it's almost not good stewardship by the offense not to run it because they're just giving it to you on a platter.
No, absolutely. Going back to that Bo Scarborough thing real quick, it is funny to me that he had the first 2 carries, for a running back on the day, and then he still just finished with those 5 carries.
Right.
And so that is a little mind-boggling how you start the game with 2 carries and you only finish with 5 on the day. I think Jacobs, they were just getting him some work just to make sure he was good.
Sure.
I think they were just going to run him 4 or 5 times, and then they were just going to shut him down.
And I'm fine with that, right? Because that's what we did with Damian against Kentucky is, we're going to give you a couple carries. Part of it a little sentimentality because it's Kentucky, and part of it is a little bit, we will kind of keep you the speed of the game. But, we're not going to take advantage of the situation, which is what we just talked about in the intro with Tennessee, right? We didn't have to sort of run someone into the ground. And so, to think that we may have done the same thing with Jacobs, I think, it's the right decision. So I don't have a problem with that at all.
Let me ask you one
Sure.
thing that I did see, which was interesting to me. Somebody took the time to break down Jalen Hurts on his passing as it relates to passes that were completed more than 1 yard past the line of scrimmage, which I found funny for all the plays that happens behind the line of scrimmage, who I can't stand. So he finished 16 of 26 on the day, and the analysis was if you take out passes behind the line of scrimmage, he was 6 of 16.
Okay.
And so he was 6 of 16 on those passes, and the ones behind the line of scrimmage, he was 10 of 10. So this is not to pick Jalen apart. I just found it interesting that they were, because even the announcers during the game, as you know, you and I were watching, were showing the breakdown of the 9 quadrants on the field, and they were saying, you know, they don't have to go long with him because they don't have to. And so I do think it's great with this young quarterback who is not quite there with his reads and not quite there with some of his underthrows, etc. It's nice that, how can I say this? We are so multifaceted with our host of personnel that you can have 10 years ago, if you and I would have said, if I'd have said to you, here's the stat line for the quarterback passing, he was 16 of 26 for 143 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 pick. And then I'd have said, David, I want you to guess the final score. I didn't tell you the rushing yards. I just told you that part. You'd have never guessed that we kicked the shit out of Tennessee.
No, you wouldn't have. I mean, that's kind of back in the day, a young Jay Barker, stat line, if you will. You don't put up 594 yards and only, 160 some odd of that, be passing yards. That just doesn't happen, especially in today's game. 20 or 30 years ago, maybe, because it was the cloud of dust kind of football. That doesn't happen today, except for it did Saturday. And there's a little bit of, we've talked about Jalen. He needs to develop as a passer. I think we all know that. And there's a little bit of, but he doesn't have to do that today. And on Saturday, it's like, we don't have to do this today.
That's my point. That's my point, is that they killed a big rival game on their series, right? One of the top 2 rivalry teams that we play. They manhandled them, and their quarterback didn't have to throw the ball really past the line of scrimmage much. Right. That's just huge for this team.
No, it really is. And so what do you think about, having that type of success running the ball with Lester Cotton getting his first start at the right tackle spot in for a dinged up Alphonse?
As Coach Saban said, he told the reporters a week or so ago at one of those press conferences before the game, I don't want to tell you stories about when I played football and how things were kind of done then. And so I didn't get to see the concussion, play that caused this with Taylor. I would have preferred Lester Cotton not to have a big, I would have preferred not to have to rely on him this heavily against Tennessee at Tennessee. But he didn't do anything that was blatant, like, wow, he really blew that play. And so I didn't focus on him as much as I probably should have, given the fact that he played the whole game. And so depending on who they run out there against Texas A&M, I'll have to do that. But obviously he afforded himself well, because I don't think he gave up any big seams on pass protection, and I think he kind of held his own against the run.
No, if we want to be sort of ironic about, maybe an offensive lineman who struggled just a little bit, we'd probably have to go to the sort of the best of the bunch, right? Cam Robinson struggled with Barnett. He sort of had his weekly, false start, and there were a couple times that he struggled. And, Barnett ended up, causing a fumble and having an interception. You can't blame all of that on Cam, but he
was definitely having trouble handling Barnett. He was definitely having trouble handling Barnett's speed. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. What else on offense? Anything else on offense? I mean, there's obviously a lot of points, a lot of yards, a lot of good times. But anything else jump out at you, or you want to go mini game ball?
Well, there's tons of stuff that we could still go over, but I think one thing I do want to mention is that, as we talked about after the game, we scored 49 points, and we had 2 big turnovers in this ball game, plays that could have really further changed the outcome of this game.
Yep.
And so, having that interception right there at the end of the first half, as we're going in to put points on the board, just once again, looking at the outcome of this game, and you look at how we had the 2 turnovers that we had, And it just kind of makes you say, wow, we still put up 600 yards on this team, and we still had a couple key turnovers.
Yeah, and that's a good point, right? Both of the turnovers, the interception and the fumble were right there at, could have been points on the board, and I guess points the other way, right? Because Tennessee did, they got the fumble and they scored, and so if we had held that ball and then we had put points on the board, that could have been, a significant shift. Add 3 or 7 to 49 and take away 7 from 10. That even starts to look better, right?
No, absolutely. Well, give me your mini game ball so I don't take yours. Who is yours?
Yeah, I'm going to go. This guy just doesn't get enough credit, it just seems like. But I'm going Jonah Williams. He is just uber impressive just every week. And the less you hear his name, the more the more impressive he really has been as a result of that. And there are a couple of guys that that you could go with for kind of the mini game ball. But as often as we ran to the right, that seemed to be sort of the strategy. And we run to the right a lot, especially with Jalen. As successful as we were Saturday, as successful as we've been all season, he's just out there performing. He's just out there doing work. And so tip of the cap, my mini game ball to Jonah Williams.
All right. Well, we didn't get to talk about this on before we flip the field here, but there's we could cover 20 different things every single show, offense and defense, and I'm gonna try to fit into your little square peg on your mini game ball, and I'm gonna give this one to Miller Forristall. And so obviously he has shown something in practice. This week they're now working him with the tight ends as opposed to the wide receivers. And so while he is under in stature at 220 pounds wet, he has obviously done something to impress the coaches, because this is the second week in a row that we have noticed him getting significant minutes with OJ when they are in a 2 tight end set, which they don't run a lot. It's normally OJ and 3 wideouts, but when tight ends were in there in this game, he seemed to be in there more than Hale was. Nothing against Hale, but once again, we're broadening the experience. I mean, how many seasons would we have gone, David was saying, we've played 4 tight ends.
Right.
So technically, right, we've had 4 tight ends in the game at different moments so far out of 7 football games. And the true freshman has obviously done something to impress.
Yeah, he really is. And you start to wonder, and we're not speculating because we just don't know, but you start to wonder, and, has Hale been sort of dinged up in a practice? Because we were literally asking, where is he? And, if he got hurt in a game and so the media is going to ask about him, or, something like that, or if he were out for the season, clearly, Saban would disclose that. But if he just got a little dinged up and kind of no one sort of knew about it, then he's not going to say it. And so, again, I'm not speculating that, but you start to fish for answers, and those are the things that kind of, turn up. Miller's very versatile. He, up through his junior year, he was a quarterback in high school, so he's quite an athlete. And so you think about using him more in sort of that H role capacity. He's very athletic, and maybe he brings a lot to that. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that unfolds, because I agree. He is getting, I gave him the mini game ball last week for his first catch, and then this week his role seems to expand and expand. So that's going to be fun to see, and kind of see how Hale kind of shakes out as a function of that, because Hale's only a sophomore. So, we're going to have a nice little run here of some young, quality, talented tight ends. They're going to come back in years to come with a lot of experience. So I think that's a good call. I think he played very well. Talk to me about defense. What stands out to you on defense?
First of all, man, we were awesome on 3rd down getting off the field. Saban was very pissed off after the Arkansas game and how things kind of went at the end of the game. And so he kept the secondary out there. They didn't sub until very late. And so I found it interesting how long the starters stayed out there. Don't know if there's a correlation with Arkansas, but I think possibly so. And so this game they kind of responded with, only giving up, Tennessee was 3 of 16 on 3rd down conversions. And so obviously that's a formula for success. I guess the first thing that jumped out to me is the continued trust in Hootie Jones. We sat there in the Ole Miss game after Jonathan Allen's interception, and Jonathan Allen's running down the field, and Hootie's really not paying attention. He's got his hands up, he's celebrating, and Ronnie Harrison is yelling at him from behind, saying, "Hey, wide receivers coming up, and he was clueless. He had no idea what was going on. And since that game, he's really turned a corner, and so once again, kind of like we just said with Miller, I mean, we've had years past where we would bring the dime on the field, and you and I would start sweating, because as soon as we'd bring the 6 DB in, it's like, oh, I know who they're going to pick on. They're going to pick on this guy in the slot. Well, now we're bringing in Hootie, and we're not putting him at the line of scrimmage. We're not setting him up for failure. We're putting him in the 2 deep with either Eddie or Ronnie. We're alternating Ronnie in the box, or Ronnie on the slot, or Eddie on the slot, or Eddie in the box. And so we're letting Hootie do the safe stuff, but he's getting more and more playing time. And I love the look that we're giving when we come in the dime, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do too. And I like the comfort, that that we have to be able to do that. There's a lot of versatility that you just spoke to, right? That when we went to a dime, we're able to sort of move people around into different roles to enable Hootie to play more of a 2 deep sort of free safety, and that's good, right? Because that gets him on the field, that gets him starting to be comfortable. You're only going to be comfortable to learn the first role when you're given the opportunity. You're only going to be able to expand to a second role when you feel comfortable with the first role. And so getting him on the field will allow him to, as the season progresses and, next year even to become more versatile and have an expanded opportunity. So getting him on the field is critical. I think when we compare back to the Arkansas game, and something that you made a very good, point and observation of, we were really in, we call it the Saban base, with the nickel, but we were in, we spent a lot of game in more like a real base, with 4 DBs. And so the fact that this week we were more comfortable, going to nickel and dime, I think really helped. I read an article, it was like, it was a miracle that, I'm exaggerating only just a little bit. They were talking about just how amazing it was that the defense improved, this week to last week. And I just got a kick out of that. I was like, well, no, it's not amazing. It's we're running our nickel, which is our true base. It's what our, defense, it's what our secondary, it's their second nature, right? And we let them do that again. And then we actually went to more dime, as opposed to forcing them to play, 4 DBs when they're kind of being shredded.
We made Tennessee adjust instead of us adjusting to Arkansas, right?
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. And it's almost as counterintuitive. And we talked about this last week, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit here, and then segue into something that Saban talked about in his post-game presser. Last week, it's because Arkansas has a reputation of running the ball. And so we were so afraid of that reputation that we let them shred us with the passing game. If we said, look, let them run the ball, let's stop this passing. Well, we stopped teams running the nickel, and we said this in the podcast last week. But this week, we actually sort of let go and embrace the talent that we have on the roster. Saban talked about, and I love how he has these little gadget names, for the formations and sort of the players. And so he talked about, we played a rabbit nickel, which was awesome. And so just think about this in the context of all of the depth issues and sort of all of the circumstances, that we're talking through. I wonder if he's been listening to the show, right? Because the deepest position on the team, and we've talked about this for, the better part of October, the deepest position on the team is outside linebacker. And so Saban said, well, we went to this nickel, this rabbit nickel, where we rotate in all these middle linebackers, or all of these outside linebackers, to keep them fresh and to keep them sort of, pressing and getting pressure on the quarterback. And what that does is, that allows us to rotate our interior guys. And so we don't have the 3 down linemen out there the whole time. We're able to rotate. And so, we're able to rotate more of the defensive or sort of the defensive end / outside linebacker because we have more of those sort of body types. We're able to take our 3 sort of 300-pounders and rotate them in the middle. So it alleviates some pressure and pain point there. And Saban said this, and this is where I'm going to tie back to the Arkansas game. Saban said, I was a little bit nervous running this package because I didn't think we could stop the run with it. I was concerned that we couldn't stop the run with it. But we were able to stop the run with it. And he wanted that speed on the field for the mobile quarterback. And so think about sort of the wrestling in his mind of, I've got to defend the mobile quarterback, but I can't let go of this rail that's old school football where I have to stack up to stop sort of the pounding running game. And when he let go of that rail, it seems like on Saturday, the defense really just sort of unleashed and it just seemed to grow. And you think about, holy cow, if we can do that for the sort of the rest of the season, I'm not going to say our depth issues go away, but man, do they lighten up.
Well, I think that speaks to the personnel, and I think that's adjusting to what you have. So that's kind of like when Blake Sims, ends up winning the starting job.
Yeah, but would you say that he's been? And look, who am I to say anything really about Saban? But do you maybe get the sense, especially when you contrast it to Arkansas and what happened last week? I mean, how many yards passing did they have? Do you think maybe he was reluctant to sort of embrace the depth that's on the roster that really is at outside linebacker?
Well, I think that my read on that is he was unsure of when he had to bring – 2 things. Number one, Daron Payne is still a first-time starter this year, and Daron Payne has played against the run at the point of attack better than he expected. But the biggest thing is that Dalvin Tomlinson and Daron Payne have not had to shoulder the load of being a 3-down player because of the freak, which is Jonathan Allen and Deshaun Hand, who can slide down, right, and can take reps away from Dalvin and Daron. And so to your point, we sat there in this game and we were like, where's Daron Payne?
Right.
Is he playing solitaire on his laptop on the bench or what? Because he had been out of the game for a while. And this speaks to Dalvin Tomlinson. Time to give him credit. We've obviously talked about how good of a player he's turned into. But this kid, in my opinion, is the linchpin on that defensive line, because you even said it. Right now, we got a lot of defensive ends, and we're running Tim Williams, and we're running Ryan Anderson, and we're running Deshaun Hand, and we got all these guys, combinations of 4 guys with their hands in the dirt. But who seems to always be one of those 4 guys with his hands in the dirt?
Right.
54.
Yeah.
And so if we could, so maybe next week we need to count the damn number of snaps that Dalvin has compared to these other guys. And I bet you we find Dalvin Tomlinson will have 10 or 12 more snaps than any of those other starters on that defensive line. So what that tells me is he has the strength. We knew he was an Ox coming out of high school. I mean, sure. I was so excited for him to get here, and then he got hurt. I think that he is a quicker, leaner A'Shawn Robinson and Jarron Reed. I mean they're obviously they're different players, but my point is he is providing something in the interior that I don't even think the 2 of them was able to provide. And so now it's providing that versatility for the other guys. And the fact of the matter too is that you got guys who are senior leaders who are, 5th-year seniors in Jonathan Allen and Ryan Anderson and Tim Williams who have the versatility to, stand up on this play, put your hand in the dirt in this play, line up on the right edge, line up on the left edge, line up over the center, sure. Drop back next to freaking Reuben Foster. It's not fair, dude. I'm sorry. I think that this is a longer-winded answer for you, but I think the versatility of those 3 guys and then what Dalvin Tomlinson brings to the table, Saban just didn't know what he had. I mean that in a nice way. He really didn't, he had to see it to believe it.
No, and that's fair. I just think though, when you're willing to sort of when you're willing to rotate more of the outside linebackers and really walk them up into defensive ends, you're still going to have the Williams, you're still going to have the Andersons, you're still going to have all of those guys, rotating in. It gives them maybe a little bit of wind. It allows you to rotate your interior linemen because, face it, if we're going to play, Allen, Tomlinson, and Payne, and then you rotate in, Hand, then we've got four guys playing three positions. But if you're going to rotate in some outside linebackers really at a defensive end to sort of contain the mobile quarterback, and you can still, be effective in stopping the run with that, well, then you've got 3 and 4 guys to play 1 and 2 interior positions. And so you have a lot more, flexibility, and you can stack your depth a little differently. And I think that's a level of versatility. And look, we don't need to go out and run it for 3/4 of the game, but maybe that becomes the default, 3rd and long. Maybe we can get away with that on some 1st and 2nd downs too, and sort of strategically find an opportunity where we can rest some guys. So I just salute to that as an opportunity to really add some life to to our defense.
No, that's true, and it also helps when you get up on these teams early and you take away their run. Right? You kind of dictate, right?
Yeah, all of that helps too. All of that helps too.
And so all of that has been a factor. Now, also to your point, I like seeing Rashaan Evans get a lot more run in this game.
Yep.
Because things happen, like when Reuben Foster went down, and we talked about that last week. So while I was very glad that Reuben was back, I'm glad Rashaan got a lot of playing time.
And he can be effective in sort of that walk up outside linebacker too. I know we've played him inside, but he can be effective in that because he's got the get off that to help contain and to chase down quarterback in the pocket.
No, absolutely. And at some point I'd like to see him grow into that role of being trusted to be the nickel line, the dime linebacker when they bring in Hootie.
Right.
Right now Reuben is trusted to do that, and obviously with the additional pounds that he dropped in the offseason, he's obviously, much more comfortable across the middle than he was before. But I look forward before the end of the season to giving Reuben a little breather on a few 3rd and 15 plays and letting Rashaan Evans stand beside Eddie or Ronnie and man the middle of the defense.
Yeah. Could we just pause for a minute and think about, it was not that long ago. It certainly didn't feel like, it's been that long ago, where we literally on this show, because of the way that he was essentially injuring himself with the way that he was tackling, that we were starting to wonder if Reuben Foster was going to play himself out of football because, the reports were that he literally was knocking himself out at practice. Well, you can't do that. That's unsustainable. And so we literally, we're asking, is he going to play himself out of the game if he doesn't make these adjustments? And so juxtapose that to where he is now. That is pretty stinking amazing.
No, absolutely. How did you like seeing Tony Brown? I noticed we didn't bring in Thompson until very late. We didn't see Carter at all. What do you think about that? We've what do you think about seeing Brown, more and more and no Carter? Are you surprised you didn't see Carter in there at all?
You can say yes and no. I mean, you could say a little bit, yes, because, Carter came in, earlier in the season. There was a play, I can't remember. We talked about it on the show. I think he even got a mini game ball for it where he came in, for someone getting, dinged up and played well. And so you could say, well, why is he not getting more run? And that's a legitimate question. I mean, if we've already burned the red shirt, then why not sort of give him some more run? And I wouldn't argue with that. It's a fair question. But you also kind of, the other side of that coin is, the first four games of the year, Tony Brown was suspended and couldn't play. And so you had to go somewhere, because we didn't have the two guys that left, right? And so you got to go somewhere. And so now you can actually come back to Tony Brown, and you can say, well, he is a junior and he has been around, a lot longer, and so do I want a junior out there versus a true freshman? And situationally, you get different answers there. But I think if I'm comparing those two guys, then probably I do want Tony out there because he's got more experience in the system, and that's kind of my thought on that.
No, I'm with you. I will say, because the margin got as big as it did, as quickly as it did, this is the first time all season that we have seen Keith Holcomb and Rashaan Evans in there together.
Yep.
I enjoyed seeing no Sean Dion Hamilton late in the game or Reuben Foster, and seeing both of those guys in there to have to learn to play together against SEC caliber opponents. I also enjoyed seeing Christian Miller and Anthony Jennings in there, and no Tim Williams and Ryan Anderson.
Yeah,
so I enjoyed seeing those four guys of the future get some good playing time in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and that's not a knock on those guys, because I like all four of them, but I like also developing depth and youth as well, and I think that's what you're saying.
No, absolutely. It was just nice to see us be able to run all those kind of guys in there against a caliber opponent like Tennessee.
Right. What else?
Yeah, I started to say I don't have anything else. Give me your game ball.
I'm gonna. This is not my mini game ball, but I'm gonna tip the cap to Ronnie Harrison. Obviously he had a big six, a pick six, and I kind of like the way he talked about it. He said, look, something I saw on film. As soon as they lined up, and as soon as their kind of running back went that way, I had a pretty good idea what they were going to do, and so I just stepped in front of the ball. And he said it felt like he was throwing it right to me.
Well, I'll tell you what was nice about that is, to his credit too, is he gave his coach some love.
Yeah.
And so, his coach told them as they were going out on the field, look for this play.
Right.
So not only had they been prepared in film, but literally they were coached up for that as they started that series, which I thought was, great timing on the defense coordinator's part.
Yeah, I really like to hear that, because it just speaks to the level of preparation that the team gets. It's not, oh, they just got lucky and they were in the right place. No. That had nothing to do with it. That's film study. That's preparation. I really like hearing that. And then, even to sort of, hey, watch this play on this sort of this drive. That says that a lot of what Alabama is doing, and, news alert, right? A lot of what Alabama is doing is sustainable. It's not whimsical. It's not accidental. And that's, a lot of that we kind of know, but it's still fun to still hear it.
No, absolutely. Listen, before you do the mini game ball, I do have something else I want to mention really quickly. Just two things. Number one, it's interesting to me in Kamara's stat line on the game. He had 8 carries for 26 yards. His longest carry of the day was 8 yards. I found it interesting that was their first play of the game.
Yeah.
So that was interesting to me that one of their longest runs, his longest run of the game, came on the very first play from scrimmage. And then the other thing that I probably should have mentioned at the beginning of the defensive side is how we just took Dobbs out of the game early with our pressure on 3rd and long. Yes. And we talked about this during the game. On those first couple 3rds and longs, when he got pressured and didn't pick the pressure up quick enough, and next thing you know, he's got these big grown men all over him. I think from that point in the game, it was like I was watching the Alabama-Michigan kickoff classic in Dallas.
Yep.
He was gun shy from then on. He was checked out then. And I'm not saying that, no one drilled him and he took a big hit or whatever, but he was off his game about halfway through the first quarter.
No, he was. And we could, break this down, but, Tim Williams really getting after that right tackle. I mean, just abusing that right tackle. I mean, he beat him, outside, and then, came back to the inside and just beat him like a drum. And why they didn't put a tight end there or give him any type of support. They absolutely
with a running back or something,
right? And they absolutely, did nothing. And so, sort of the first 3rd and long they had, it was like 3rd and 13 or whatever it is. Tim Williams beat the tackle, and then just and then just slung, Dobbs down. And so it was a 4th and long. They had the punt. On the very next series, it was a quick 3rd and long, and he beat the tackle the other way. And Williams must have just lined up and said, well, I've already got you beat because, is what I did last time, and you're leaning that way. And so now I'm going to kind of do the opposite, and I'm going to beat you. And it was just a circumstance that Jonathan Allen was back there too. And Jonathan, got tackled with the sack, but they were both back there. And we kidded about, they were stacking up the tackles in the backfield like cordwood because they both just like beat their man, but took them into the backfield. And then they got another sack. And then I think the next possession, Tennessee got a third and 3, and they ran a nice little pick route. It was really good, play conception, and they got the first down. But just like, seconds later, they were in another 3rd and long, and it seemed like we got another sack then. And so every time they got in 3rd and long, he just, he just couldn't make a play. And of course, the Alabama defenders were there, and it doesn't take long for that to really rattle a quarterback. And so. He's, especially when the offensive line is already dinged up. And so you maybe have questions about that kind of already. And it's coming to fruition that we can't block them, and they're going to be in my grill all day long. He seemed to have a little, who was it? Jordan Jefferson.
Yes.
I think we rung his bell a couple times. Literally or figuratively, and that kind of set him off. But still, Dobbs seemed to have a little happy feet because he knew that that he was going to have a dance partner in the backfield.
No, absolutely, and they did. They started off the game. Kamara had an 8-yard carry. Hurd had a 7-yard carry. That tight end Wolf had a big 16-yard play, and so their first 3 plays of the game, they're at our 42-yard line, and they're like, oh wow, they're bringing a good package in.
Yeah.
Well, to your point. After those first 3 plays, the next 3rd down is a 3rd and 13 sack for Tim Williams. The very next play, 3rd and 17 sack for Jonathan Allen. The very next time is his interception to Ronnie Harrison.
There you go.
And so that is, I beg your pardon, I stand corrected. The next time was 3rd and 9 sacked by Reuben Foster and then Ronnie Harrison. So to your point, 3 3rd and longs set up that pick for Ronnie Harrison.
Yeah.
Give me your mini game ball, man. What do you there's a lot to choose from. Who you want to pick here?
Man, I am just in love with this rabbit nickel and what I think it can do for our depth on defense. So I'm pulling a Tommy, and I'm gonna deflate or overinflate or whatever this mini game ball, but I am giving I mean,
are you giving something the rabbit nickel? Are you coining a new phrase, the rabbit nickel?
No. That's Saban. Saban called it that.
All right.
But I'm going to do something that you've never done.
Okay.
For all the ways you've twisted up the mini game ball, I'm giving my mini game ball to the rabbit nickel.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go there when you said that. Okay. All right. That's cool. That's all good, man. You can try to be unique if you want to. Well, There's lots of guys that can get this. There's lots of headliner guys.
Sure.
We've obviously, I've talked a lot about Tomlinson, who obviously finished very high up on the stat sheet. I'm going to give this guy, this is a guy who hasn't made a huge contribution yet, but right now he's that unsung guy that is not doing anything to worry you. And so I'm going to give it to Anthony Averett. He finished with 4 solos in the game. All he did was be steady, and that's kind of all he's got to be, because hopefully Minkah and Marlon are gonna start with their best. And so he seems to be getting more experience, getting more comfort level being out there. As you said earlier, there was lots of times that they would motion the single wide receiver over to his side that was already had 2 wide, and they would try to confuse them. He would sit there with Minkah and Marlon. They didn't seem confused. They would very quickly just play multiple chairs and move to who they needed to cover. And he looked comfortable doing so. And so I hope that continues.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And just everything you said there. I think that when you watch a game, And look, not every player is this way, but when you watch a game and you don't hear his name, it's like we talked about Jonah. You didn't hear his name, and so meant that he had a good game. The less you hear Anthony Averett, his name called, the better he has played.
For what we need from him, right? And that's not a knock on him. For what we need from him, I mean, obviously, if we're hearing from him, he's had a pick. But if we're not hearing from him, like you said, that's okay too.
Yeah, and I mean no innuendo by that. I'm not, I'm not trying to be subversive in any sort of way. I just think, that, and you think about that a lot at kind of cornerbacks, but Humphrey's a little more of a, sort of a glamour type player, and Minkah in his role, he has the opportunity to be as well. And so the other corner is just, quiet guy over there is, he's not giving up any plays, and so we never hear his name, but they're not completing any passes that way either. So that's what you look for. Dude's going to get a shot in the league. I'm not going to predict a whole lot over that, but because I just don't know. But he is earning himself a shot, and we could do a whole thing about Maurice Smith. Is he going to get the same shot that Averett will in the league? Because
Yeah, so. No, I'm with you. Well, let's flip the field to special teams. Early in this game, Hurts takes a big sack. He should have thrown the ball away. They've got a little momentum. They've kind of flipped the field. Here we are at our 34-yard line, 4th and 7, and JK just nails it 62 yards and takes Kamara back to the 4. And obviously, he had a nice return. Obviously, a great start for JK. Finished with 4 punts for a boring 200 yards, but not a whole lot. We're used to seeing that from JK, but I was very concerned at how we seem to. There seemed to be something in film that Tennessee saw running to the right, both on kickoff returns and punt returns, and they had a lot of success early in the game. And tell the listeners kind of what we saw of how we kind of adjusted to that.
Yeah, they did definitely see something there and had a lot of success, and we kind of altered up how we were kicking, and typically, and I say all of last season and this season as well, during kickoffs we've been kicking to to the left side of the field. And almost, purposely trying to pin, use the sideline as to kind of help tackle and limit the field that we have to sort of cover. And
even bringing our guys over, right? Even
kind of bringing our guys over. And, we kicked more to the right this time. And I don't know. I'd have to go back and maybe watch that. I mean, I don't want to say we were doing it accidental, because you can't miss that poorly. We had to have been doing it kind of intentionally. But then Tennessee was having some success running the ball, on the kickoff returns, and so I don't know if maybe we shouldn't revert it back to what we've been doing. So we did something different, and the team had a little more success. The opponent had a little more success. So I don't know that I liked what I saw, but that's something that they get paid to coach and do their jobs as well. I think they saw something on us, and we tried to over adjust it. I think we should have just kept doing what we do.
Well, I did, my take on us starting to kick the ball to the on kickoff, starting to kick the ball to the right. They only had one deep guy back, and he was in the end zone to the left, and their guy to the right was up, cheating up to like the 10 or 15 yard line. And so because we kept scoring so much, we had so many opportunities to kick the ball off, and there were numerous times that we kicked the ball 3 or 4, and we kicked it over the guy's head who was cheating at the 15-yard line, and we just let the ball roll, get us that touchback instead of letting them return the ball. And it wasn't until very late in the game that Tennessee finally dropped that guy back and said, we're not going to let you do that anymore.
Right. We had 8 kickoffs, and 4 of them went for touchbacks, and so we had some shorter kicks too. And that was, look, it seems like it wasn't that long ago where four touchbacks in the season would have been really nice, and that's not being too facetious. So 4 in a game, I guess I can't complain. But we had some shorter kicks. I don't know. We seemed to be, it just wasn't as flawless there as we've seen before. So
I'm with you. Now talk about Adam Griffith on the field goal.
It's disappointing. That's disappointing for 2 reasons. Maybe 3 reasons. I mean, you want the guy to make it, and it's 37-yarder, and for his just own sort of self gratification, you want him to make that kick. You want him to make it and build up confidence because we may need a kick at some point. And then the very, very just selfish reason. Man, 52 sounds really good. I would have loved to have been over 50, and had he made that kick, we would have been.
Well, and you're right, and hanging 50 on them would have been a nice thing, and I just wanted you to speak to it because here's that, he came into that attempt 8 of 11, and right. that's obviously good, but here's a 37-yarder, and he missed it pretty good, and so as we try to be straight on the show, definitely. Let's just say the special teams didn't get an A grade overall in this game outside of J.K. Scott.
Well, I'm giving an A to open field Eddie too. I mean, he had that 79-yard punt return. I still just enjoy watching. If you could put him in the open field like on a loop, I would be mesmerized for probably a longer amount of time than I should admit to.
Well, definitely. His ability to see the field and just the vision he shows is awesome. Tell me about this Texas A&M team, man. We talked the last time about Tennessee obviously has was able to turn the ball over 7 times and still almost win this game. What kind of team is this that's going to show up? Is this a team that are they as good as advertised, or is this a team that might be a little bit overrated?
I think they might be overrated, and I'm really cautious, in saying that.
You don't like to say that, man, but
no, I don't, and I don't want to. I don't.
What it is, though.
What's that?
Isn't that what this is, though?
I think that it is, and I hate to sound, kind of disrespectful, but they're number 6, and that just seems really high. And I get that sort of a funky, even a funky college football season. How, who are sort of the uber elites in college football, and and once you get past, Alabama and Ohio State, and if you want to stretch just a little bit and say Washington, the way they've been playing, who else is sort of there in that uber elite, and so somebody's got to be number 6. And so I guess if you're in the SEC and you're undefeated, then that qualifies. I mean, heck, with Tennessee was number 9, and so it is what it is. But when you look at kind of their metrics, and you and I were even just talking metrics, earlier today, and so both teams average 40 some odd points, and you think, oh yeah, that's kind of an even matchup. But if you look at on defense, they're ranked number 98 in total defense, and they're giving up 437 yards. And, we're ranked, much higher than that, single digits. And, we're giving up in the 200s. And you say, that's an interesting sort of differential in those stats that, on defense, one is so much clearly better than the other, but a point scored, they're similar. And so you think, well, something's going to give, right? I mean, we're not going to give up 45 points, are we? Or
200 yards is a lot, right? That's a lot on the defensive side of the ball,
right? Or are we going to hold them to 200 yards, and what do you get out of that? And so, I do think that I do think they're overranked. I do think that they've got some really good talent. They've got a nice collection of talent. I really like Myles Garrett. He's been dinged up. I think that if they use him sort of judiciously, and then coming off the bye week, that he can give Cam some trouble. And we've talked about that with the Burnett kid. I like their sort of collection of wide receivers. They seem to have one of every type. They've got the Ricky Jones, Seals Jones, which is just a 240-pounder, almost a tight end. He's just so big. And they've got Josh Reynolds, who's more of a speedster. More of a tall speedster, but then they've got Christian Kirk and Speedy Noel, who kind of the smaller, more sort of water bug type guys. They seem to have one of every type And so, that's something that keep our secondary busy. Their quarterback, he's a good runner, but he's maybe an average passer. So I don't know. I think they've got a lot of talent, but I just think the way they sort of come together and mesh together, they might be, and they're number 6 ranked. So, but they just, to me, for my money, the sum of the parts, the whole is not as great as the sum of the parts.
Well, and this is not meant disrespectful when I said overrated, right? I mean, you are what you are as a team, right? And it's not their fault that they're being ranked number 6. And to their credit,
did you just tease me out to make me say bad things about them?
No, man. It's just, it's not. It is what it is, right? They're not the ones that decide the rankings, right? The coaches don't care about the rankings. I'm just saying that, this is a team that when we said Tennessee, coming into that game, you turn the ball over 7 times at a top 10 team, SEC team, and you almost win the game. Well, guess what? Shame on Texas A&M, right? Because if a team gives us the ball 7 times, we better not have to win in overtime against an SEC opponent who gives us the ball 7 times, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So to your point, when you talk about the 40 points a game, well, what is it, right? Is that the 67 points you put up on Prairie View at home? And that balances out with the 24 points that you did at South Carolina. You get what I'm saying, before the Tennessee game?
Right.
And so all I'm saying is what team is this? Is this a team that we could hang 67 on Prairie View if Saban would let us, but he's not going to ever let us. And so you look at a South Carolina team at South Carolina on the road, and they win 24-13 is what I'm saying. Right. And so I just think that this is a team that we match up very well against. This is a team that, given what we just got through saying on this show about the versatility with our defensive personnel and our going to a dime where we've got 6 cornerbacks on the field, they're not going to know what freaking hit them. They don't play with their 4 wides. They don't have a tight end in their primary, main formation. They kind of show a 4 wide look with their personnel. Well, they can create mismatches all over the field against teams like Tennessee that lost the players that they lost with 2 DBs in the secondary. But with our current healthy unit, and we run 6 cornerbacks in the dime, dude, they're not going to know what hit them. This is not going to be 59-0 like it was 2 years ago in Bryant-Denny. But we're going to see fans leaving in the third quarter that we're going to say, why are y'all leaving? And, give us your season tickets, passes back. This is not going to be 49-10. But, I think we're going to see, a 41-17 game. It's still going to be a 3-score football game.
Yeah. I look at I hear what you're saying, and I continue to kind of look at some of their parts, and I say I see where situationally they can give us trouble. I mean, they've got a thumper at the safety position, and like I said, I do like some of their quarterbacks, and they do have a mobile or some of their receivers, and they do have kind of a mobile quarterback. I think, and you and I talked about this, for every time the media says, well, Trevor Knight has a win against Saban, every time I hear that, I think that they have money on the game, because every time you kind of rattle Saban's cage, he doesn't respond well, and Trevor Knight, by no fault of his own, is being used by a third-party media to sort of rattle Saban's cage. And so I think that I think there's going to be something to that. Look, I'm suddenly in love with this rabbit nickel because. And it's not just because, it's new and shiny, but it's because it answers some of the questions we've been talking about this season at sort of depth, at just critical positions. And the reason that they deployed it, the reason the coaching staff deployed it, was to help against mobile quarterbacks. And, they even said, hey, we use this in the second half, against Clemson, in the championship game. And you say, well, one of the weapons that A&M has is this mobile quarterback. And so you say, well, we're going to run this sort of rabbit nickel, and then, obviously kind of have a nickel on top of that, then you might start to really be effective at taking away a lot of what A&M has to offer. their mobile quarterback, because you're stopping that with speed up front, and you've got a nickel on top of that, and potentially a dime on top of that, because you just take a linebacker out. And then you've got a lot of sort of protective, in the secondary. So I'm not look, I've got 31-13 written down. And so, you're like just a little bit level, kind of a level up from that. But, I'll look at I do this, right? We sat down a couple of years ago, I guess it was last year, and we were looking at the stat book on Michigan State, and we said Michigan State shouldn't even share the field with us because of what they're ranked on defense and what they're ranked at these different positions. And that's just a metric-based look at it. It's not have to be 100%, but it definitely, I've not seen it be glaringly wrong either. And when I see them ranked, 98 on total defense, and then, you talk about situations where maybe their point total has kind of been padded, potentially. And then, an overtime game against Tennessee, which gives you more opportunity to score. And overtime games tend to have inflated scores because it's sort of that fast break style of play. I think we have the opportunity to, and look, a week ago I wouldn't have said this, but I think we have the opportunity to really make a show of this. And so I think 31-13 is probably where I feel comfortable.
I'm glad I'm getting you a little more bullish on this team, man, with these score differentials.
No, I think what I saw Saturday, and then sort of digesting that and kind of hearing, different things about it. I look, I think this team, they need to not get in their own way. This is a championship team. This Alabama team is a championship team, and it's almost stupid cliche to say the only team that can beat them is themselves, because that's just a blowhard kind of comment for someone who wants to sound like they're saying something bold but not really put themselves on the line. At the same time, there's a little bit of truth to it. And so if this team can get their head right and keep their head right, then it is just days. Then all we need to do is tick off days on the calendar until we get to championship number 17.
So when I said a few weeks ago that this is done, and after the Ole Miss game, and you thought I was crazy, you're starting to agree with me a little bit.
I've seen more from this team since then.
Okay, so that was a pretty good call on my part after the Ole Miss game.
This has been another, I don't know. I mean, what do you want me to say?
No, I'm just simply saying, man, Ole Miss was our toughest team on this schedule. Their ones were, closer to our ones, and their twos were, they were the only team on the schedule whose ones matched up well with our ones. And I just don't think the other teams have it.
Yeah.
And so I hope I'm right. And so I hope I can brag about it when the season's over.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I hope you're right. Hey, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And this is something we do. We haven't done it as often as we should have. I don't think we've done it this season. I mean, obviously, we always like to say thanks, to the listeners. And so I just happened to jump out onto iTunes, and I haven't done this since last season. And just to see if we've gotten any more reviews or comments and stuff. And I think we had someone give us a 5-star review and kind of ask where the next show was, and then we had some guy at some point give us a review and say, well, they're just a Homer fans, and so whatever. But we just, and in fact, when we're recording this, so just over the weekend we had a review, and it's BG Bulmer, and gave us a 5-star review. The only Alabama football podcast to listen to. I'm not going to read all of it, but he says, hey, this is the best Alabama football podcast out there. I really enjoyed every week. You understand so much more about the team and players when you listen to the podcast. He wants us to be a little more positive maybe on the team sometimes, and we understand that. And then I kind of like, he says, hey, not always a good podcast for children in the car, and so I respect that. I know that you and I both have kids, and so we are intentional about that. But sometimes when it's just you and I talking, we let it fly sometimes, and so we probably need to be more cognizant of that. But bottom line is, hey, we appreciate the review. We very much appreciate you listening, and if you're out there listening, we would love nothing more for you to check us out on iTunes and subscribe, and leave us an authentic review if that's what you feel comfortable doing, and we'll try to read them out on the air and kind of give some love back to some listener appreciation. So. That's what I got. That's what I want to close it out with. I appreciate the review. I know we both do. We appreciate the listeners. And with that, Tom, this has been another edition of the Alabama Football Podcast. Roll Tide.
All right, so we're over our hour mark.
Awesome.
But no, man, that was a pretty bold comment, man. You're kind of bullish calling championship number 17 here, huh?
Man, I just